This is session 10, the last session for Poetry 101. The topic today is punctuation. I am going to leave in the description below two websites that are I find very useful. But they do have an interesting perspective. So I'm going to read from that first one, Palette Poetry. They talk about it from an editor's perspective, punctuation. What they say: punctuation at its core is a tool meant to indicate to readers how to read your writing. It helps us as readers to know where to focus. Without punctuation, we don't know how to move through your poems. We can get lost or lose our way. We won't be able to fully engage with your language, and this can become a problem as we try to evaluate your poem. They go on to talk about punctuation, and in the other link, Essay Pro, they have a lovely list of types of punctuation that are common in poetry. They are, again, the link is down below, but the commas and periods are what I call full stops or end stops, ellipses, exclamation marks, colons and semicolons, dashes like N dashes or M dashes, apostrophes, hyphens, and parentheses. And they put line breaks in there as a kind of punctuation for lineated poetry. What I find interesting about this is they don't include other things that are showing up and have been showing up for decades now in poetry, things like underscores and forward and backslashes and asterisks and curly or square brackets, the number sign, the equal sign, the plus sign, the dollar sign. All of those ones are symbols of shared experience. And a lot of that is online experience, which poetry has to contend with our current experience as humans. It is those symbols, things like a line of asterisks and slashes and numbers, etc., when put there, is an old way of, and a shared way of swearing, for example, when you can't actually do that. They, as symbols of shared experience, punctuation of all kinds must keep up with the reality of both the poet and the reader. In the class, we had 3 example poems, one that was a play on unusual punctuations and symbols to really push that. Another had no punctuation at all. And how the author managed to convey meaning and how to read the poem quite easily without any punctuation, contra to the editor. And a poem that had some punctuation, but not others. The key, I suppose, in terms of readership is to think about how other things like white space, line length, for example, can act as this guide, because it is important to guide your reader, let the reader know. So if, for example, 2 contemporary examples, a line that starts with a capital and ends with an end stop, like this is a cat with a capital T and an end stop after the word cat. That's a closed sentence, and it's closed for a couple of reasons. It's fully covered and it's a fully semantic sentence. It has the symbols of closure, the beginning capital and the end and so. And we know through both those things, and often on a page, it can often rest on its own line. Those are 3 different ways of telling us that this is a closed sentiment. If, on the other hand, we put this is a cat who ate a dog on 2 different lines, no capital at all, no end stop. So you have first line, this is a cat. Second line, who ate a dog? It's an open, well, I don't even want to say a sentence, although it could be. It has an open meaning. Partly that's because it breaks, so it's got extra space, and it leads us to suspect there might be even a third line. There's no indication of capitals and end stops or commas or anything like that. It's not a closed sentiment, it's an open sentiment. So a lot of your decision with respect to what kind of punctuation to use in your work will come from what do you want to do with respect to being open or being closed as a sentiment within the poem. What I'm going to suggest you do is, as you read poetry this week, look at their uses, look at the line breaks. How do they indicate closure? How do they indicate openness? And then with your own work, go back and look. Have you chosen, or is it just, are you following the default procedure? Because we were all taught to use punctuation for prose. That may or may not be useful in your poetry, depending on what you want to do.